The galaxy would never be the same, and Earth would be its new master. The dreadnought loomed larger than ever, its engines burning like a star as it moved ever closer to the heart of the Council's fleet. The leader stood at the front of the room, his gaze fixed on the ship's massive silhouette that now filled the screens. It was no longer just a warship. It was a statement. It was the embodiment of Earth's resolve, a world that had been underestimated for far too long. And now, as the final moments approached, there was nothing left to do but watch the inevitable unfold. The fleet was preparing for one last, desperate act, but the leader knew it was futile. Earth had already won. One of the officers turned to him, his face pale and stricken with disbelief. "We can't just let them wipe us out like this, sir. We can still—" The leader cut him off with a raised hand. "No, we can't. This is how it ends. Earth has already taken their place. Our time is over." The officer fell silent, looking at the screens with a mixture of regret and fear. The dreadnought's weapons were powered up again, ready to fire. There was no escaping it. The attack was coming, and this time it was final. "We've underestimated them for too long," the leader continued, his voice heavy with a mix of anger and resignation. "We thought they were nothing. We thought their silence meant weakness, but now we see that silence was strength, and that strength has come to claim what's theirs." As the last moments ticked away, the leader closed his eyes, his thoughts drifting to the past, to all the times Earth had been dismissed, ignored, and forgotten, to all the years spent looking down on them, thinking they were nothing more than a small, insignificant world. But now, Earth had proven that they were anything but. They had shown the galaxy that even the smallest of worlds could rise up, defy the odds, and become the greatest force the galaxy had ever known. And now, Earth's dreadnought, a symbol of that strength, was coming for the Council. The officer's voice trembled as he spoke. "They've fired, sir." The screen exploded with light as a beam of pure energy shot out from the dreadnought, cutting through space like a blade. The beam slammed into the Council's flagship, instantly vaporizing the entire vessel in a flash of white-hot energy. It was over. The flagship was gone, reduced to nothing but debris in an instant. The leader's heart sank. The silence in the room was deafening. The Council had been wiped out. Every officer, every vessel, gone. The dreadnought had spoken, and there was no arguing with it. He turned to face the officers who remained, his expression hard. "Earth has spoken. We've seen their power, and we've seen their will. And now the galaxy will have to live with the consequences." Another officer spoke up, his voice barely audible. "What now, sir?" The leader's gaze turned to the viewport, where the dreadnought's massive shape loomed in the distance. "Now we wait. Earth has won. There's nothing more to say." The officer nodded, his expression solemn. There was nothing more to be done. The dreadnought was making its way toward the heart of the galaxy, and the rest of the Council's forces were no match for it. Earth had not only won the war, it had reshaped the galaxy in its image. The leader allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. They had been blind. They had been arrogant, and now Earth had come to claim what was rightfully theirs. As the dreadnought advanced, the leader knew one thing for certain. This was no longer their galaxy. Earth had taken control, and the rest of the galaxy would have no choice but to follow. A confident alien council prepares to crush Earth, believing the planet is an insignificant, primitive outlier. But when their fleet encounters Earth's unexpected response, they quickly realize that their arrogance has led them into a trap they cannot escape. Earth has been underestimated, and the consequences are more brutal than anyone could have imagined. The alien council chamber thrummed with nervous energy, an unusual hum in the air that even the oldest members felt. The space was filled with strategic murmurs, the sounds of rapid commands, and fingers tapping consoles in a rhythm born of panic. The invasion force had been assembled for months, a perfect, calculated strike meant to annihilate the humans once and for all. Their fleet was vast, their technology advanced. Earth had been reduced to nothing more than a distant myth in the minds of most aliens, an irrelevant, backward world, unworthy of their attention. But now, as their flagship sensors pinged, with the readings from Earth's atmosphere, that myth was about to be shattered. The Council had never truly believed that Earth could defend itself. A planet surrounded by the emptiness of space, far from galactic trade routes, left alone for centuries. How could it have possibly advanced enough to pose any real threat? "Deploy the fleet," one of the officers barked, his voice cutting through the air, dripping with condescension. "Crush them, as we always should have done." Another officer glanced at the commander nervously, unable to suppress a twitch of doubt. "Sir, something's different. The sensors, there's something off about the signals coming from Earth. They're not acting like we expected. It's almost as if they're waiting for us." The commander sneered, his sharp eyes narrowing with disdain. "Waiting for us? They're a primitive world. They've had centuries to prepare, and still they can't even match our technology." He scoffed, barely able to hide his arrogance. "Let them wait. It won't save them." But even as he spoke, something on the screen shifted, something unsettling. A flash, then a bright beam of light cut across the sensors, as if a flare had just ignited at the edge of the system. The fleet commander stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. "What the hell was that?" Another officer turned to him. They're firing at us, at long range. But it's not a weapon we recognize." The screens displayed what appeared to be a simple pulse, yet its energy reading was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. It wasn't the sophistication of advanced weaponry that made it so terrifying. It was the sheer raw power behind it, and the uncanny precision with which it moved through space. The fleet commander's hands trembled as he turned to his subordinates. "Full shields! Now!" But it was too late. The pulse shot forward, a blazing trail of destruction, faster than any fleet could react. The beam struck the lead ship of the invasion force. There was no explosion, just a silent, perfect dissolution. Of the vessel into nothingness, the ship simply ceased to exist. No fragments, no remnants, only empty space where it had once been. The council chamber was dead silent. The commander's voice came out in a tight whisper. "How?" The officer at the console blinked, unable to fully process the situation. "Their technology? It's simple, too simple for us to even understand how it could be this effective." A chill swept through the room as another ship in their fleet exploded, the same eerie silence accompanying its obliteration. The commander's face went pale. Impossible, but the impossible continued. Earth's weapons, still unknown, moved with relentless precision, picking off ship after ship, each destruction more methodical than the last. No bluster, no theatrics, just cold, efficient devastation. "They thought it was mercy," the fleet commander murmured, his voice breaking. "It wasn't." One of the officers stared, mouth agape, before whispering in disbelief. "They were never meant to win. This was how they always planned it. They were never afraid. They were just waiting for us to show up to make the first move." The next moments, the first waves of terror began to ripple across the fleet. A tactical panic spread like wildfire. The aliens scrambled to turn their ships, to escape, to do anything, but nothing could outrun Earth's fury. The shots kept coming, and the fleet kept falling. The commander could only watch in helpless horror as Earth, the same world they had so arrogantly dismissed, laid waste to their forces, one ship at a time. "Sir, they're not negotiating," the officer said, her voice quiet but heavy with dread. "They're not asking for peace. They're ending us." The commander's fists clenched, his mind spiraling into shock, the reality of his situation crashing down with brutal force. "This can't be happening. Earth isn't supposed to do this. They're supposed to be weak. Why didn't we listen?" The Council's ego, built on centuries of unchecked dominance, had led them here, to a final moment of reckoning. Earth, in its quiet strength, had unleashed a power beyond their comprehension. It wasn't just a warship they were up against. It was the unstoppable will of a world that had waited patiently for the right moment to strike back. And now, as their fleet continued to disintegrate, the answer to that question hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They thought it was mercy, the commander muttered again, as the last of their ships was reduced to nothing. It wasn't. And that was before Earth even responded. The alien fleet was no longer the imposing juggernaut it had once been. The pristine ships, once symbols of power and might, now drifted helplessly through space, their elegant frames marred by the eerie silence that followed the annihilation of their comrades. Only a handful remained, each vessel trying desperately to regroup, to devise a plan, but the cracks in their armor were widening with every passing moment. The Council's flagship, once the heart of their empire, now hovered in a defensive position, surrounded by what little was left of their fleet. The bridge was eerily quiet, save for the constant beeping of systems that no longer seemed to matter. Every officer was glued to their console, eyes wide, their faces pale and drawn, as they stared at the ever-growing signal from Earth's dreadnought. The fleet commander's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to focus. He had been on the front lines of countless wars, had seen battles that tore through entire civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for the destruction Earth had just unleashed. "Or what are we missing?" he muttered to no one in particular, his voice barely audible over the hum of the dying ship's systems. "How could we be so wrong?" His first officer, a sharp-eyed alien with silver scales, turned to him, her expression grim. "Sir, we've underestimated them, all of us. We thought they were primitive, that they couldn't possibly have technology on par with ours, but now we're fighting for survival." The commander clenched his fists, the reality of their situation hitting him like a physical blow. "I should have seen it earlier. Earth's silence, their isolation. It wasn't weakness, it was strategy." And now he turned toward the viewport, where Earth's dreadnought loomed ever closer. "Now we pay the price." The officer's voice trembled. "We're not even fighting them, sir. They're simply eliminating us, methodically, efficiently. It's not just power, it's something else." "What do you mean?" the commander asked, turning his gaze back to her. "There's no victory dance, no boastful threats. They're not enjoying this." Her voice faltered slightly, the realization hitting her full force. "They're erasing us, like a reminder that we were never meant to be here." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their meaning. The fleet's officers exchanged looks, some too scared to speak, others simply too stunned. Their once unshakable confidence had crumbled like a house of cards. Earth, the world they had dismissed for centuries, had returned with a vengeance. The dreadnought moved ever closer, its massive form now occupying a good portion of the view. Its sheer size was intimidating, but what truly struck terror into the hearts of the remaining fleet members was the sense of purpose that emanated from it. This ship wasn't a weapon, it was a message, and the message was clear. Earth had come to take what it had been denied for so long. Their time was over. A shudder passed through the remaining fleet, a collective recognition that their survival was no longer a matter of strategy, but of luck. "They're closing in, sir," an officer reported, his voice tight with panic. "At this speed, they'll be within range in mere moments. They're targeting us again." The commander's heart raced as he spun around to face the display. Sure enough, Earth's dreadnought was charging up again, its enormous guns beginning to glow ominously. The officer at the console quickly attempted to calculate the trajectory of the blast, but his hands trembled as he worked. "Sir, if they fire this shot, we won't survive. Not even the shields can withstand that kind of force." The commander's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to fight back, to retaliate with everything they had left. but a sinking feeling settled in his stomach as he realized that every move they made now would be futile. Earth's ship had already demonstrated that it didn't need to engage them in a traditional battle. It didn't need to match their firepower. It only needed to show them how small, how utterly insignificant their entire fleet was. In a final act of desperation, the commander slammed his fist on the console, his voice filled with frustration and rage. "We've been outplayed. We've been blind, arrogant fools. And now—" He looked around at the officers, their faces pale with fear. "We're going to die." There was a long silence, the weight of the words settling in like a thick fog. The realization that they had lost to Earth was impossible to ignore, but there was no time to dwell on it. The dreadnought was mere minutes away from firing again. "We need to prepare," the commander muttered, though he knew it wouldn't matter. "If we're going to go down, we go down fighting." Another officer, older and more composed than the rest, spoke up, his voice calm but grave. "Fighting what, sir? We don't even know what we're facing. We're being hunted. Not even the most advanced technology we have can outrun them. We're fighting ghosts. We're fighting something we can't even comprehend." The commander turned toward him, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and defeat. "Then we die knowing that we were wrong, that we thought we could control the galaxy, that we thought we were the ones who had all the answers." Outside, Earth's dreadnought grew ever closer, its weapons humming to life once again. The crew's hands were shaking as they readied their final attempts at defense, but there was no hope. The time for defense had long passed. This was no longer a war. It was the final act of a tragedy that had been unfolding for centuries. In the distance, the dreadnought fired. The explosion that followed was deafening, but there was no sound in the vacuum of space. A blinding light filled the view, and for a moment the fleet commander thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the end. Maybe this would be the final flash before they were wiped from existence. But then a second wave of destruction hit. The dreadnought's weapon had already obliterated the ship in front of them, and now it was aiming for the heart of their last remaining forces. One by one, the ships exploded, reduced to nothing more than charred fragments scattered across the vast emptiness of space. The commander stood frozen, unable to look away from the destruction unfolding before him. The few ships that remained were quickly destroyed, no mercy granted. Earth's silence was deafening. It was only then that the true weight of it all hit him. Their greatest miscalculation had not been their failure to fight back. It had been their failure to understand Earth's patience, Earth's silence, their will to survive. And now, as Earth's dreadnought loomed over the ruins of the alien fleet, the commander knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Their arrogance had led them to this moment, but it was Earth that had ended them. The commander's hands were trembling as he gazed at the remains of his once proud fleet. There was nothing left, only the cold expanse of space, dotted with the wreckage of alien ships that had once ruled the galaxy with impunity. The silence was deafening. The hum of the ship's failing systems, the occasional beep of the scanners, all of it seemed distant now, as if the universe itself had shifted into a different dimension. He had never known fear like this before. It was a sharp, gnawing sensation in his gut that made his skin prickle. Fear not of the inevitable, but of the unknown. Earth's dreadnought wasn't just destroying their fleet. It was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. And the lesson was this: Earth had never been as weak as they had believed. Earth had simply been waiting. "Is there anything left, sir?" The voice of his first officer broke the silence, her voice barely more than a whisper. The commander turned, his expression hollow, his mind too numb to process her words fully. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he simply stared at the void outside the viewport, where the dreadnought hung in the distance like an ominous shadow. It was so massive now, its engines glowing with a terrifying light as it drew closer. The fleet was gone. Their most advanced technologies, their might all reduced to nothing. "No," the commander said quietly, his voice hoarse. "There's nothing left. We've failed." His first officer stepped forward, her eyes searching his face, but she didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. All of them knew the truth now. Earth had shown them the power of patience and silence, the kind of strength that no weapon or fleet could defeat. They had underestimated Earth for so long, assuming that their isolation, their primitive ways, would keep them from ever being a threat. But now, the galaxy would have to reckon with a power it couldn't even comprehend. One of the officers at the communications panel spoke up. "Sir, we've tried every last channel. We've sent out distress signals, even attempted direct communication, but there's nothing. They're not responding." The commander's jaw tightened. "Of course they're not." He turned away from the viewport and paced to the center of the room, his mind still reeling from the series of events that had unfolded. "They don't need to communicate with us. They've made their point. Earth doesn't need our technology. They don't need our diplomacy. They only need silence." The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. No one dared to speak for fear of disrupting the dreadful truth hanging in the air. The commander continued pacing, his thoughts tumbling over one another, trying to find a way out of the crushing reality. "What's their next move?" the first officer asked quietly, her voice still full of uncertainty. "I don't know," the commander said, his voice rough with exhaustion, "but I don't think they're done with us." He stared at the massive dreadnought on the screen, its silhouette now clear and imposing. The fear was real now, no longer just the product of a broken ego. It was the fear of what they didn't understand, what Earth was capable of. They hadn't just come to defend themselves. They hadn't come for diplomacy. Earth had come to remind the galaxy that the rules had changed. They had come to prove that no matter how much power you had, no matter how many empires you controlled, a single quiet world could rise and claim its place. The commander's mind raced with strategies, with plans, anything that could offer them a glimmer of hope. But deep down, he knew there was nothing left. Earth had already spoken, and now the galaxy would have to listen. The second officer, more cautious than the others, raised a hand. "Sir, should we surrender?" The commander froze, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "Surrender?" He turned toward the officer, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think that would save us? Do you think they care about our surrender? Earth doesn't need us. Earth is not here to negotiate." The officer shrank back as if struck by the commander's words. There was no mercy in Earth's actions, no room for negotiations. They had come with force, with a power that left no room for diplomacy. "We were never meant to win," the commander whispered. "Earth was always the hunter, and we were the prey." The officer at the controls looked up again. "Sir, the dreadnought is coming closer. They're preparing to fire." The commander's heart sank, but his voice remained cold. "Then let them fire." There was no point in trying to run now. No escape. The alien council had fallen prey to their own arrogance, their own blindness. They had treated Earth as a myth, as a non-threat, and